started on the last session for the section 1201 rulemakings. This we've turned audience participation section. We have 7 people who have signed up. And so the first person, however, someone we were not able to accommodate for our class 3 panel, which was held in DC. So we're going to give her a little bit more time, which is similar to what we did for the people in DC who were unable to come to LA. So I think first we will introduce ourselves, and then perhaps Ms. Gilbert, you can introduce yourself. So my name is Reagan Smith, the Deputy General Counsel of the Copyright Office.
I'm Stacey Cheney, Senior Attorney Advisor at NTIA, National Telecommunications and Information Administration.
John Riley, Attorney Advisor, Copyright Office.
Julie Saltman, Assistant General Counsel of the Copyright Office.
Anna Chavez, Assistant General Counsel, U.S. Copyright Office.
It's nice to meet you. Karen Guilford, I'm the General Manager of Movies Anywhere.
Thank you. And you would like to offer comments in respect to class 3, which concerns space shifting, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, and I understand you have a presentation for us?
Yes, I do.
Okay, you can go to the podium and present that. We will call that Exhibit 3C, and that, along with the rest of the exhibits, will eventually, shortly, be posted to copyright.com.
I have a presentation, also a short video that I'll lead with. The video that I'm going to present is actually a piece of advertising, a 30-second spot that describes our product. This is how we communicate the value propositions to consumers in the marketplace. So I thought it would be helpful to start with this.
Movies are a big deal, and now there's a way to bring them together. Introducing Movies Anywhere, your purchase movies in one app. Stream instantly or download for later. You can watch on any device, anywhere you want. Explore new releases, build your movie library, purchase movies, and redeem eligible codes from Blu-rays and DVDs. So your movies are with you wherever you go. Isn't it nice when it all just comes together? Movies Anywhere. Anywhere is here. Download the free app today.
So I'll walk through a quick presentation to give you an overview of Movies Anywhere. As you can see from my video, Movies Anywhere, as its name speaks to, is a product that's focused on feature films. We feel very lucky to work on our product because we know that consumers love feature films, which is really the product that streams through Movies Anywhere. The other thing that we see happening today, and one of the reasons why Movies Anywhere was sort of brought to bear by the studio partners that power it, is folks have an amazing experience in their homes right now to watch movies in the living room, with broadband speeds increasing, screen sizes increasing, and a proliferation of devices in the living room now that really make it seamless to access content with a couple of clicks. We know that people now really enjoy watching premium content in their home. But one thing that has emerged in the space over the past few years with the proliferation of broadband and devices is a little bit of consumer confusion about, if I buy something here, can I watch it over there? And so the studios came together to fund and power Movies Anywhere to solve that and create what we call interoperability between different services. So the mission statement of Movies Anywhere is it's an app, as you saw, also web-based, and it brings your purchased movies together so you can watch them whenever you want, when and where you want. So regardless of where you purchased them, you can link your accounts to Movies Anywhere. As you saw in the video, we will bring the collection together, and then we'll also bring that consolidated collection back out to your retailer endpoint so you have a choice where you want to experience that consolidated library. This is a slide that shows an overview of our ecosystem at this moment in time. So the interoperability feature really brings together 3 main cohorts. The first one is our studio partners. We currently have 5 of the major studios in our service: Sony Pictures, Fox, Universal, Disney, and Warner Brothers. So those are the 5 studio partners. There's about 7,500 titles in the service. We have retailers integrated, iTunes, Vudu, Google Play, Amazon, and Fandango now. That constitutes approximately between 75 and 80% of the US market share for electronic home video licenses that are sold. And then on the lower left-hand side, you see all the platforms where consumers can download the service or navigate to the service on the web. We are on all the Apple platforms, Android platforms, Amazon platforms, Roku, and those smart TVs and other endpoints that are powered by operating systems like Android TV, where consumers can access the Google Store and download our app. This is just some quick stats on the app. Our tagline is "Your movies together at last." We do focus on feature films. As I mentioned, there's 7,500 titles available in the service, and what that means is that the 7,500 titles, which are a combination of titles from the 5 studios, are available for this interoperability feature, meaning that Movies Anywhere has taken them in and mapped them to all the retailers, which facilitates the movies being able to flow across the platforms. We launched on October 12th of last year. The app is free for consumers to download.
Can you explain the difference between this movies? There was a previous product.
Yes.
Is it Disney Movies Anywhere, or what's the difference?
Sure. Disney Movies Anywhere was only Walt Disney Company feature films, so it was limited to a catalog of about 500. So Movies Anywhere expands the offering, utilizing some of the sort of backbone technology that was developed for DMA, but brings 4 more studios into the mix.
Thank you.
We are an English language supported app, although the content does support the actual films are available in other languages, and right now this is a service that's available only in the United States. The next few slides will just give you a little bit more of an in-depth product walkthrough. If you have the app, you may have seen some of these. The first screens just show you our welcome and sign-up process. When somebody navigates to the app, they're just greeted with a few quick screens that they can get past pretty if they would like, but it just kind of gives a little bit more of an explanation of what the app does, so we're very clear about the service that we're bringing. You can sign up for the service using an email and password of your choosing. You can also sign up using Google or Facebook. The first page that you're greeted with when you download the app or navigate to our website is what we call our Explore page. This is the home screen. We do try to personalize it for each user profile, and really the purpose of this page is to let consumers know sort of what the newest releases are out in the marketplace that are available in the service, any special features or promotions, seasonal things, offers that we may have or that our studio partners may have, things that we think the consumer would be interested in knowing about. The next screenshot and area we're showing here is really the bread and butter of the service, which is our retailer account linking screen. So this is where consumers will go to create the linkage between Movies Anywhere and their preferred retailer. So they can navigate to the retailers where they purchase films, hit that connect button. It's a pretty seamless integration where you would also then sign into Vudu or iTunes or Amazon, Fandango or Google. It sends you back to Movies Anywhere. It gives you a very clear signal that you are connected and your movies are starting to flow in and then flow to the other retailers. So there's a lot of feedback loop as this functionality is happening. And then you can also set on the screen the retailer that you would like to be your default. So that you'll see in screens I'll show in a minute, when you go to buy a movie, then that would be your retailer of choice. If you haven't set one, you'll be presented with all the options available to purchase on that platform. The next page is our redeem page. This is where consumers who have purchased a physical DVD that has a redemption code in the pack and it gives them an opportunity to also enjoy a digital copy would come and enter the code that comes in an insert in that pack. here, and then we fulfill the title right in Movies Anywhere. It gives them feedback that the title has been successfully redeemed and it drops into their locker.
Can I ask a question? What if you lost the code?
If you lost the code, there are ways. We have some forgiveness through customer care, but it is the same as it is, but it does operate similarly to losing a coupon or a gift card or something like that. But there are some remedies that we can that happen in the customer care channel occasionally.
And you can redeem this through for Blu-ray or DVDs. Are there any other physical media?
It's for the titles that have the code. It's clearly marked on the physical packaging. If the unit you're buying has a code in it or not, they're generally referred to as combo packs because they give impact the consumer a couple of different format options to watch the movie. So typically that could be an SD disc, a Blu-ray disc, and then a code. Now you might see one with 4K and different options, but generally it's called a combo pack because the user's getting more than one option of how to consume it.
And is this is a rollout starting in October 2017, or was it previously available? I guess if the service didn't exist.
There were other options to redeem those codes on other services, and those still exist today. So for instance, in Disney Movies Anywhere, you could have redeemed Disney codes. On some of the retail partners, like iTunes, if you really navigate, there's an area where certain studios may allow consumers to redeem codes directly on iTunes, or in a service like Vudu, you can redeem codes. That's decided on a studio by studio basis in their individual agreements with the retail partners.
So in terms of the studio agreements for Movies Anywhere, can they take those codes that they may have had for Disney Movies Anywhere or something else through Vudu or Walmart or whatever, and use that into this Movies Anywhere service?
Yeah, we honor codes sort of like backwards compatible, if you
That's
will.
what
So the code redemption opportunity doesn't start just for codes generated after we launch. We go all the way back and index codes that are out in the marketplace.
And then besides the redeem codes, and then I saw Voodoo up there, are there any other methods to convert done generically, like a hard media into a digital form?
In our app, code redemption is the only method that we power and service, but you mentioned Vudu, who's one of our partners. They have a program you may be familiar with called Disc to Digital for some eligible titles with certain parameters that they could probably speak to better. You are able to convert a physical disc to a digital copy. And if you do that on Vudu and then link your Vudu account to Movies Anywhere, those copies would come into our service and then also flow out to the other retailers that you are connected to. So they're treated just like any other digital.
Besides that's actually really helpful. And then besides Voodoo, are you partnered with any other third party that has a similar offering?
No, just because our other retail partners that we've integrated so far don't offer that. But Voodoo just happens to be the only one that I know of that has that service right now and also has an integration.
So I'm trying to understand if there's a way, if Movies Anywhere is a useful service for sort of back catalog, media that consumers may have, do they need to see whether it's disc to digital is offered by Voodoo, or do they need to buy a new copy that would have a code, or what? Or is it just doesn't speak to someone who may have bought a DVD or a Blu-ray, 5 or 10 years ago?
I mean, it depends just on how that title is, what unit you bought, and then what studios have done, that disc to digital license. So I can tell you personally, I did disc to digital with titles that I bought 10 years ago, and it worked perfectly fine. Didn't work for every title I bought 10 years ago, but it did work for some of them.
Thank you.
The My Movies tab, which is the center navigational item on the app, is what it says. That's where a consumer's movie library is stored. That's their digital movie collection. They can sort it, they can access playback from there, and that's where we also save any viewership of a movie that may be stopped partially through, so you can pick it back And then the last page I think I'm showing is our movies detail page. So this is really the backbone of the system. There's a page like this for all of the titles in our system. It gives the basics that you may find on other sites that offer information about feature films. And this is where consumers would hit the buy button and be presented with retailer choice of where they may want to purchase the movie. Movies Anywhere does not sell directly. We're just a hub. If you went off, for instance, to purchase on iTunes or Amazon, you complete the purchase there, be sent back to Movies Anywhere. That movie, if you have the linkage accomplished when you need to buy something, it would automatically flow within. It happens within seconds back to Movies Anywhere and then out to the connected retailers.
So if I were to use the Movies Anywhere app to buy a movie on Amazon, for example, the places where I could watch that, like the number of devices, that would just all be determined by Amazon. So Movies Anywhere wouldn't alter the scope of that purchase in any way, is that right?
Yes, we do alter the scope of that purchase. So let me give you an example. I'm going to use Apple as my example. If you buy a movie on iTunes and you are linked to Movies Anywhere, and you're also linked to Google Play or Amazon or Vudu, you will be able to watch that movie that you purchased on iTunes on your Apple TV and your iOS devices, which is part of their more closed ecosystem. But that movie will also flow to Movies Anywhere, and you will be able to watch it anywhere our app is available, like for instance, a Roku device, an Android device, an Amazon device. So Movies Anywhere expands the ecosystem of the places where you can watch the movie that you purchased on iTunes, or Amazon, or Android, or any of our retailers. So it's exponential, because you can watch your movie back not only on the platforms where Movies Anywhere is installed, you can watch it on any of the platforms that Amazon's installed on, Vudu's installed on, Google Play's installed on, iTunes are installed on, Fandango now is installed on.
Does it affect the, I guess, number of devices you can watch it on at the same time?
Yeah,
Or is that a
there
different
are,
restriction?
as most of any service that's doing streaming, there's, I don't know if I know the exact number, but it's pretty much on par with other similarly situated services that, devices and simultaneous streaming, we don't look like outliers on any of our parameters, so.
Would that be on per title or per access to your service? In other words, if you bought a household service for your home, would that access be limited to 4 or 5 instances of playing, and it might be 4 or 5 different movies at the same time, or would it be 4 or 5 instances of the same movie playing at the same time? Where's the limitation?
It's on an account basis, that's usually how it's managed, so you can download the app for free, but it's a one-to-one relationship, so one Movies Anywhere account can connect to one iTunes account, can connect to one Amazon account, not multiple. And then you have an opportunity, so for instance, me, I can set up a sub-account for my husband, a sub-account for my child, a sub-account for my second child. And so that would be, I think you do that up to 6 times. You could set it up for 4 users, and theoretically, then, we could all be enjoying the service at once, right? So you're able to set up profiles that can access the same consolidated library. For children, you could set a limit on the MKA rating, so they're not exposed to perhaps R-rated content you have, but that's kind of how it works. It's a one-to-one relationship between MA and each retailer, one account per, but then you can set up sub-accounts for your family to access sort of the, if you will, family movie collection.
You said you could download the app free. Is there a monthly subscription service charge here, or is it just the whole thing is free?
The app is free to download, but the only thing that a consumer is able to play back are the movies that they have purchased at retailers.
So the use of your app is free as long as they purchase the video in one of these other services?
Exactly. It sort of adds more value, you could argue, to the purchase of the film, because now you are able to, enjoy it in many, many more places of your choice. So you don't have to worry, so to speak, if you bought a movie and you decided to change device from Android to Apple or vice versa, or buy a Roku in the living room. You can make your own device. The intent is you can choose the device you want when you go into Best Buy or Costco or wherever and hook it up and know that your assets, the movies you purchased, are going to be able to be played back there. So it's sort of almost like a utility, if you will. That's kind of helping consumers, be able to watch the movies they bought wherever they want.
Can you watch rented movies, like rented through Netflix or Amazon? I guess not Netflix, but I know you can rent movies on Amazon. Can you rent a movie and then watch it in the app, and then also do the same expiration parameters apply that would apply in Amazon?
Right now, we do not service rental or VOD. It's solely limited to a transaction.
And then these uses, maybe all of them go to personal use. Are there any restrictions on public performance? And I'm thinking specifically like a teacher in a classroom being able to show like a class, a movie that maybe the teacher purchased through one of your partners.
That's covered in the terms of use. It's available. All those parameters are outlined in the terms of use. I honestly don't have it memorized to know about that specific.
And do you know if any of so say someone, like for Netflix generally, I think even 100% captions its movies, so if something is captioned when it is, or at least the availability of captioning is available on whatever medium they purchased it, and they decide to watch it through your app, is that captioning still available? And then I guess the second question would be, if they purchase something where captioning was not originally available, do you guys make that available for your service?
We are in complete compliance with all of the ADA captioning and all of that, and we have our own files, if you will. We store all of the 7,500 so movies we have, and so we will give the best available experience based on what we have. And even if one of our retailers for some reason or not has sort of a lesser experience, we will have, when you will get the better experience, if you will, in Movies Anywhere. So we're sort of, our intention is almost to set the bar, and that, when you come into our service, we'll have adhered to all of that, and you will enjoy it with all of that. So we're, since we're studio powered, we want to have almost like, a gold standard situation there, so consumers always know that they can go to this place and have kind of, the best experience for that film. So another example, unrelated, that probably is more clear, is a lot of home entertainment purchases come with an extra benefit of bonus content, which a lot of fans enjoy. You could go to different retailers and see different incarnations of that bonus content. Some blow it out awesome and it's all there. Some choose not to host it, so you buy it and you just see the movie. We have all of the bonus. So since we're studio powered, we're like, hey, this is the place where no matter where you bought it, if somebody tells you about a piece of bonus and you're like, wait, I didn't see that on retailer X, they didn't give it to me, well, let me go check Movies Anywhere, and you'll still have access to sort of the ultimate package that you paid for regardless of where you bought it.
And I know you were talking about captioning specifically, but I guess I also wanted to ask about audio description. Like, for example, Hulu is involved in litigation right now because it does not currently offer audio description. So I don't know if that's something that Movies Anywhere is also considering offering, or if its partners offer that service.
I'll probably have to follow up on audio description. We just launched in October, and it has been discussed. But it would be okay to follow up, because I don't have a clear answer. But the intent is that we would be the borrowers.
In addition, do you have all the languages that might be available on the original source video as well?
Yeah, we again, whatever was sort of available in the United States, all the Spanish tracks are prevalent. Some movies have multi-language tracks where, because of the creativity of the film, there could be French or something else. So we're sort of, we're adhering to whatever was distributed in the United States. So if the film was offered in the home entertainment window in the US with multi-language, then we'll also have those languages.
you. Continue, please.
I think it was last slide.
All right, great. So, thank you. That was very informative. With respect to class 3, is it your view? I guess I'm trying to understand how you would like us to think about this in terms of the relevance to the proposed class. Are you suggesting that it could provide an alternative such that the exemption isn't necessary, or are you seeing that the exemption might pose a harm to this business model? Can you sort of talk about what has brought you here today in connection to the 1201 proceeding?
Yes, I mean, my perspective on the main feature that I highlighted, which we call interoperability, is, that's what it's intended to do, is to facilitate sort of, consumer choice. So for instance, you don't have to feel locked into one platform, one retailer, a physical device, because of where your movie purchase originated from. So you should be able to, the intent is to add more retailers over time, add more platforms, add more content, so this robust system exists. And that's in an effort to respond to consumer needs and advancements in technology that have kind of happened in parallel to the home entertainment industry. Look, I would argue that, the alternative, it would have a major impact on the revenue. Movies Anywhere would certainly go away. This is invested in by the studios almost as a cost center. I'm not generating revenue, although I have buy buttons that goes out to the retailers. I'd like to hope that we will be able to influence revenue over time, but I'm not measured on a revenue goal, for instance. So I think the studios would no longer invest in this service, and that would have a significant impact on the digital marketplace, I would think, for sure, and could have a major impact on just the transactional window overall. I think it would drive up the prices of transactions, or could eliminate the ability for consumers to buy movies over time, because everything would resolve perhaps to a subscription service then, where you could pay a fee and access it. And I don't know, we see evidence that consumers do like to buy movies, just based on the volume in the marketplace.
Can you alter any of the movies that once you loaded them onto Movies Anywhere? Maybe that's the wrong terminology, but I know we heard testimony about your play, for example, that might allow you to take out some content. And we also, in connection with Class 1, heard from people who wanted to queue up specific clips. Is any of those features available through your app?
Not right. So it's DRM protected. So there's you can't go in and extract clips and have them as a separate video file. We're 6 months out of the gate. It was a very complicated launch, but in the future, could I see us putting pointers in for specific scenes where, hey, here's that really funny scene, and you could maybe put a bookmark there to access it. That could be a future feature on our roadmap that we could add, but it's just a matter of figuring out when that.
Does it import sort of the existing bookmarks, like the chapter selections you might have?
Yeah, absolutely. But the ones that are the
physical
are on the physical copy. Yes. So all the chaptering is there, right. And there's still images, just as that kind of represent each chapter. So as you're sort of scrolling, it's really easy to see like where you are in the movie and kind of land on perhaps the exact moment that you're trying to find in the movie.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, our next panelist is Mr. Johan George. He also has a presentation which is going to be entered into the record as Exhibit 3D.
So we're still focused on Class 3.
Yes.
That's right. So if you could start by introducing yourself and your affiliation, and then proceed with your presentation.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So my name is Johan George, and I am following up with a presentation that my colleague John Mitchell gave in the Washington portion of this panel. I want to thank you for allowing me to come and present, and my main purpose here is really to follow up on some questions of technology nature that came up at the last meeting. So this slide is really just to say that I'm not an attorney, I'm a technologist, and so probably not going to be very good at
We will
those
hold our
kinds
legal
of
questions.
Exactly. So I'll just give a very quick recap to refresh your memory. So what we are trying to do is to allow consumers who've actually bought DVDs, Blu-rays, content in one way, and allow them to watch it anywhere. In some sense, watch it on their phones. I think something similar to what Movies Anywhere seems to be willing to do. One, or does I guess already. One, what's true is that there's a lot of movies out there. There's over 100,000 of domestic mainstream movies, not counting a large number of educational videos, all of those other kinds of things. And people, you can put, obviously, people have purchased them, but it's not very convenient to only be able to watch it on a DVD, or maybe they bought it on a DVD some time ago. Maybe the current version is even not in print. They'd love to be able to move it to some place that is more readily watchable. And of course, we know that there are many people out there who just go and make a copy and watch on their favorite device. What we'd like to do is provide an alternative that's legal and that's well protected. So the idea is that we allow you to transfer data from whatever media you have to an electronic, some other different media, typically electronic, and only one fixation of that data is kept at any one time. So, for example, if it gets transferred from the DVD to electronically to a phone or something like that, the DVD no longer exists, and we are very happy to make sure that at no time a copy ever exists.
Do you have some slides sort of explaining that process? Because I think since we did hear from your colleague, the more you can focus on the technical aspects of what OmniQ is trying to do, that will be most helpful to us. But
Yes.
it doesn't interrupt you.
Absolutely. So again, it's encrypted using multiple 2014 keys. All the time we again continue to respect the intent of CSS and XDS. And I think my colleague probably explained the exemption. So let me go to the next slide, which talks about encryption. So I think two questions came up, and I'll answer those, and you might have more as I explain it. But the question was of how they encrypt and how strong is the encryption. So the data is actually broken up into chunks, probably about a megabyte in size. Each chunk is encrypted with its own 2014 bit key. So again, we think that that's better protection than the content scrapping system, CSS, which uses 40-bit keys, or AXDS, which uses 128-bit keys. As you probably know, with every bit you add, it increases the security levels by a factor of 2. So it makes a pretty big difference. Something else that's true is unlike CSS and ASDS, which use a single key for all the data, and typically for one given movie, they're all encrypted. Every copy of that movie is encrypted with that same key. If you have a movie, every megabyte chunk is encrypted with its own 2014 bit key. So if you take a 4 GB DVD, typically there's probably 4,000 of these 2014 bit keys that are all unique. What's true is also if someone else has the same movie and they've encrypted it themselves, that would be a completely different sort of keys that's used. So, again, we think that protection is pretty strong. The algorithm I know that came up in Washington that gets used in extreme cipher, which is similar to CSS and ASDs. And again, each time the data is moved, new keys are generated, new keys are provided. Another question that came up in Washington is transfer duration, which is sort of how long the transfer process will, for example, like taking data from the DVD to store it on a hard drive. How long does that data and its copy of the megabyte is still in volatile memory? And then it's destroyed on the DVD and then it's still on the hard drive and volatile memory is destroyed. One question that came up is how long is it actually in volatile memory? And again, it's less than a second.
Does that assume you have a fast network? Does it depend on the speed of your network?
It would depend on the speed of your network. So what's true is you sort of look at the speed of average networks in the US or going even across the US, actually even past that. Latencies are about 50 milliseconds. The average transfer speed is about 50 milliseconds. So a megabyte of data is typically transferred in about 250 milliseconds. But it could turn out that the network is a little slower, it could take a little longer, but the point is it's well under this duration. Something else that's true is if your network is slow, you could we could just limit the process and say the network's too slow and the network speeds up to allow that to take place.
Does both the decryption and the re-encryption, does that also occur like in volatile memory?
Yes, everything occurs. So yeah, when it adds up, all adds up is sort of well under half a second, not under a second. I think those are the questions that we mentioned in Washington. If there's any other questions, I'd be happy to.
I don't think so. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, next on the list we have Corey, apologize, I'm not pronouncing your name. Dr. O. So for each panelist who comes up, if you could please sit down, just introduce yourselves, your affiliation, and then which classes you wish to refer to in your testimony.
Refresh my mind on the numbers of the classes.
You said class 1 and class 7.
7, thank you. Hi, I'm Corey Doctorow. Thank you so much for entertaining my comments. I'm going to speak in a personal capacity. I am a consultant to the Electronic Frontier Foundation, but really I'm speaking in my capacity as a dystopian science fiction writer. After a few days of listening to the hearings, I wanted to weigh in specifically in that capacity. I'm a best-selling novelist. I write for Macmillan's Tor, the largest science fiction publisher in the world, and published by Random House and HarperCollins in the UK. And I'm deeply embedded in the entertainment industry, and I have a real interest in copyright being held in some regard by my customers. I feel like we have now entered an era in which getting people to pay for works is an act of moral suasion that, as we've seen, virtually everything that people want to take for free, they can, despite our tender administrations. I mean, I think it's pretty telling that we just watched a presentation about an anti-piracy technology that was played back on VLC, which violates CSS, and which is distributed from Hungary because it's the last territory that will tolerate their servers. And here it is, having been trafficked into UCLA Law School by some technician in violation of Section 1201, potentially criminal violation if they got paid for it. And I think that in both of the areas that I'm commenting on today, we heard a lot of talk about the idea that bypassing a TPM, even with no nexus with copyright infringement, should be viewed with great skepticism if it frustrated a business model. And this is where my background as a dystopian science fiction writer comes in, because it really is the stuff of a Black Mirror episode where designing a technology such that bypassing a TPM is necessary to use it to benefit you instead of its manufacturer's shareholders gives you the power to invoke the state's might to prevent your customers from thwarting your commercial desires. And I feel like it does bring this framework that's supposed to regulate my relationship with my supply chain as a working creator who depends on copyright to extract my living, it brings it into disrepute. It makes people think that copyright is a nonsense. And I wanted to intervene in this normative way and ask you, as you deliberate on this, to consider that as you narrow the exceptions that have been asked for in the service of defending a business model, rather than in the service of preventing infringement, that you create the situation in which people think that copyright is not something that they can or should bother to understand or give any real serious consideration to. And that if you were to be as liberal as possible in allowing people the traditional enjoyment of their own property, regardless of the impact on shareholders of the firms that manufactured that property before they exhausted their interest in it by selling it to a member of the public, that you would go far to bringing copyright back into repute in the digital age and to helping creators like me. So that's really all I have to say.
Thank you, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Your comments. All right, our next panelist for the audience participation is Cynthia Plogle. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name.
No, it's not cool. Hi, I'm Cynthia Rufflovel. I'm the intellectual property attorney for iFixit, and I deal mainly with trademarks and patents, so I'm not a copyright expert at all.
Are you here to talk about Class 7 or a specific class?
Class 7 was repair.
Yes, primary. I guess that's the class that most applies to. I just wanted to take a higher level view and remind everyone of the purpose of copyright law. In the Constitution, it says, to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. And on copyright.gov, it says, copyright protects original works of authorship, including literary, dramatic, musical, and artistic works such as poetry, novels, movies, songs, computer software, and architecture. As I watched these hearings over the last few days, it's become clear to me that companies are misusing and abusing copyright by improperly asserting it as a cover for protecting other interests, often to the detriment of society by conscious design decisions that impinge people's rights in their own privacy, in their own property. So I'd like to ask you to please keep in mind the purpose of copyright in considering these exemptions. I also volunteer for Surfrider, which is an environmental group dedicated to the protection and enjoyment of our oceans, waves, and beaches. And I'm heavily involved with plastic pollution issues. I've seen that society is divorced from experiencing and seeing the consequences of our disposable products. Plastics are derived from fossil fuels, with all that entails. And many items, like your plastic water bottles, are used only once. And you may put them in the blue bin, but the truth is that less than 10% of plastics are actually recycled, and the rest of them end up in our environment. We have to realize that there is no away when we throw something away. We only have one planet, and it's important to consider what we do with our waste and whether we create it in the first place. So many electronics, consumer electronics, are similar in some ways. On the front end, the devices contain rare earth metals, which are a limited resource, as well as sourcing them new by mining can be harmful to the environment and human health. They're designed often to be used for just a few years and then discarded for the next new thing. They may have a battery that wears out and it's not easy to replace, or the screen is cracked, or there's some other malfunction. And even if someone wants to repair, copyright law is used to impede repair. And this results in mountains of e-waste. Repair.org says Americans alone generate about 3.4 million tons of end-of-life electronics per year. If you put every blue whale alive today, and there's 10 to 25,000 of them, on one side of a scale and 1 year of US end-of-life electronic products on the other, the end-of-life electronic products would be heavier.
Those products contain toxins and heavy metals, things like arsenic, lead, cadmium, mercury, and dioxins, as well as explosive elements. And unsafe processing, such as burning in developing countries, exposes people to health hazards, as well as polluting the water, air, and soil. In the environmental community, we often talk about the 4 R's: reduce, reuse, repair, and recycle. Many so-called end-of-life devices could be repaired, reused, or recycled, but for companies' misuse of copyright law. So I would ask that you please consider the environmental and human health impacts of your decisions, as well as the purpose of copyright, and act for the greater societal good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Sina Karifar.
So I'd like to start off by thanking you for coming and listening to the comments. Both I wish I'd been here for all 3 days. Unfortunately, I was only able to join today. So I have kind of a long story with the DMCA and unlocking. It goes back far into my life to when I was a college student.
Are you here in connection with any other?
I am a tech fellow at EFF, but I actually haven't done anything really related to DMCA work at EFF. So when I was in college, and I was at that point I was a green card holder, so I moved to the US and moved back to the UK, and I took a phone with me from the US to the UK that I unlocked. And it was a bit of an arduous process. At that point, this is the time of flip phones, right? The Razor was just coming out. And I took, and it wasn't a Razor that I initially took, it was a phone that used to belong to my mom. You know, cell phones were pretty early days then, and it took me a really long time when I got there to be able to actually use the phone in the UK. And it was, I remember it was very clearly, it was the summer of my first year in college, that I had a couple of weeks extra, and I spent the whole time basically tinkering with this phone trying to get it to work. And I've always been kind of an electronic software person, so there's a good amount of tinkering involved, and eventually I got there and I unlocked the phone and realized, hey, if this is so painful for me, there are probably other people who are in a similar situation who can unlock their phones. So I actually ended up, by the end of the kind of process, I'd hired multiple programmers who were helping me. We wrote a piece of software to kind of commercialize this and to enable people to unlock mobile phones. And it went well. I kind of got a little bit lucky. It was right before the Razor came out. The Razor was probably the most popular phone ever at the time that it was released. And the software did quite well until at one point I got this is how the news was broken to me. My mom called, and she received a cease and desist letter from Motorola, very specifically highlighting DMCA section 1201, fines of up to, I remember, $250,000 per incident. I don't know if we would have phones, but it's a lot of incidents, right? My mom called me. She was very, very worried, as you can imagine, right, about what I'd been up to in college. And I, as a student, particularly as someone who was a green card holder, not quite in the bucket of being a citizen yet, I was really worried about it. I shut down the service immediately, it was like, shoot, I guess I'm stuck, right? And so there was a pretty big chilling effect on my business, and it took me, over the course of a few months, we ended up being connected to via various law clinics to Jennifer Granick, who then, I believe, published an article on it and then pushed the original unlocking exemption to be added. And that exemption, I believe, was in place for 6 years, right? So through two kind of 3-year processes, and then was removed. And at that point, I just happened to have finished. I carried on doing entrepreneurial work, and I just happened to have left my last company. That last exemption was removed, and so I hopped on whitehouse.gov and created a petition asking the powers that be to make unlocking legal again. Not so much because I personally do that much unlocking at this point. I've completely moved on from that industry, but because I do fundamentally believe in this right of users, once they purchase equipment, to be able to do what they want with it, right? And particularly if they bought a cell phone, to be able to use it on the network. We kind of, it was a bit of a long battle. I went to Congress a bunch of times, and obviously the Unlocking Act, as well as the FCC's kind of new rules around unlocking were put into place. Now I know this year, I think for unlocking, no one's really challenged it in any meaningful. There's no real opposition, which is great. I wish Congress had made it a permanent exemption. But there are kind of related issues that I think are worth talking about. So one of the things that's started happening recently is that instead of controlling devices by locking them and preventing access to the wireless network itself, the carriers are instead preventing users from using kind of over-the-top services. And somewhat ironically, those services are the very traditional thing that you buy a cell phone for, voice service. So voice service today is moving away from being, it's definitely not analog and it hasn't been for quite some time, but it used to be a specialized network, so CDMA 2000 for some devices, etc. It's moving toward being voice over LTE, which is really just a variant of voice over IP. And today, if you buy a phone, iPhones happen to be okay because Apple kind of pushes the carriers on this. But if you buy an Android phone on, let's say, Verizon or T-Mobile, and you try and take it to AT&T, you can unlock your phone, right? Verizon sells its phones unlocked because of FCC rules. T-Mobile doesn't, but you can unlock them and get them across for the most part. But you can't get HD voice. And at this point, the carrier is almost entirely moving towards HD voice. No one's deploying all the typical voice services anymore, right? And you can't use HD voice on AT&T. Similarly, you can't even buy an unlocked phone, a phone that was unlocked originally, and move it across to AT&T and use that service either. But it's one of the ways that the carriers are choosing to maintain control over the device ecosystem that's allowed on their services. So that's one thing that I wanted to highlight as kind of an issue, and I think a real reason for not just renewing the unlocking exemption, but also perhaps broadening it to take these facts into consideration. Because the only way to really get around this problem, and this is what a majority of users do, is jailbreaking your phone and basically changing the firmware to make it seem to the carriers as if this is an approved device that has HD voice capabilities, right? So I think it's a reason why jailbreaking and unlocking are now becoming a lot closer in the way that they work. And the other part, I'm still in telecoms. I'm co-founder of a company called OpenSignal, and as well as Staircase 3. And telecoms are really moving to Internet of Things, right? And we've heard a lot today about car and repair. I mean, there's unlocking of the modem in your vehicle, right? If you purchase the vehicle and it's a T-Mobile and Sprint emerging and T-Mobile is shutting down its 2G network at the moment, you may well want to unlock your vehicle at some point in the future to change the modem and connect to a different network. And as those telematics systems are becoming more and more integrated, and may well mean unlocking the actual operating system of the vehicle in order to be able to do that, right? But it's not just vehicles. I mean, Internet of Things is going to spread more and more so. And we're seeing it also in the telecoms industry in the devices that you use to connect to the network. So it used to be the case that everything came from the cell tower outside. Today, a lot of connectivity happens indoors via femtocells, software-defined radios that basically generate a carrier cell signal inside your home. There hasn't been, I wish I had thought about it to push for this particular class of exemption, but customers buy these femtocells. If you're an enterprise, you're often paying $5,000 or more to buy these devices. And they use your internet connection to generate unlicensed frequencies, network that your users can then connect to, right? But in a very similar way to, it's the two ends of your cell phone, right? The cell phone is communicating with the tower is communicating back. Those devices are now also locked, right? And only will broadcast on the carrier that you purchased it from. And I mean, I guess it's going to go to the next triennial, and we'll see if maybe I have the energy, or someone has the energy to push for the ability to reverse engineer and change those devices. But I think it's in this larger class of things that people don't do because the there is, in my view at least, a pretty strong chilling effect from 1201 in terms of trying to reverse engineer these devices. And I think it's going to become, particularly with 5G. 5G doesn't make it inside buildings, right? It's high frequencies. And they're about to do an auction on this, but 25 gigahertz, 35 gigahertz. Those frequencies don't make it inside buildings. So it's not just going to be your cell phones. You're almost always going to have a device inside the building, similar to a Wi-Fi router that provides service. So, I mean, I think this is a trend that's only going to kind of continue, and the range of devices that the proponents and the nonprofit organizations and the companies come and petition for is only going to grow. And to me, that's just generally a bit of a worrying trend, right? That, each time they have to make a de novo case for these different exemptions. I know from the folks at EFF who work on this that, it's a huge burden of energy that can be going towards other equally, if not more important work, right? And I think it's a shame that, when I was pushing Congress to pass the Unlocking Act, this was something I pushed them on pretty hard on, right? And I think, the original intent of the DMCA in 1201 was to prevent piracy. I actually think it hasn't had a huge impact in reducing piracy. I'd be really interested in meaningful studies that would look at that and how much of piracy was stopped due to preventing, DCSS and that kind of thing, and how much of it was actually due to the copyright notices that, Cox and whoever else, Time Warner, etc., whoever else was sending to their users, right? So generally, I was reading through the report that you guys sent back in June of 2017, and I feel like one of the things that wasn't really questioned in that document was what is the real utility today that having these protections really enables. And the particular part that worried me, and this was true of Unlocking, and I brought it up with the folks at Goodlark's office and everyone else's office who I chatted with, is that the tools and services are just absolutely critical, right? No one is able to unlock their own cell phone, right? So, I did it in college. The technology was way simpler then than it is now, right? But it's literally out of access for 99% of people. And I grabbed a little screenshot here. There was this argument made in that document that perhaps the primary value of anti-trafficking provisions has been to prevent the development of mainstream business models based around the production and sale of circumvention tools. Permitting the distribution of such tools can significantly erode an important benefit. And I think there's two problems with that argument. One of them is that it's just like a standard slippery slope argument, right? Like, if we enable tools and services for these very specific classes of devices, no DRM is ever going to work again, right? Or even that DRM isn't going to have its intended purpose, which I don't think is the case, as we've talked about the car repair pieces of it. The copyright impacts of allowing people to repair their cars are really minimal. No one's going to take a Toyota's firmware and copy it onto a Honda, right? It's just not a real world issue. And so, to me, I think that argument around allowing for those tools is just really, really strong, and I didn't see that really reflected in that document.
So we do appreciate your work focused on the rulemaking and that policy study. In that instance, we were looking at legislative proposals, including we recommended Congress may consider one for this versus third-party systems. So while we do appreciate everything you're saying, if there's ways you can focus on what we're just interested in under the current sandbox that we've been constructed to do this rulemaking and what we can do.
Sure. Yeah, so I think on that front, Unlocking is probably the one that I'm most qualified to talk about, and I think those examples of Unlocking becoming a bigger issue, both for handsets and for the equipment being used to generate that signal, is really, really important. I would express support for some of the other exemptions that have been mentioned. I don't think there's any that I can specifically talk about. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. All right, next we have Carl Means. We'll be talking about class support.
Hello. yesterday it was discussed that potentially there was no one in the room that would be able to build the HDMI device we were discussing. And I just wanted to say that I probably could.
Thank you.
That's all I got.
I will take your word for it.
Short and sweet. All right, lastly, we have Jay Freeman.
Hello. So I'll be speaking on class 4, then I'll make a comment on class 8, I believe is the number, video game preservation, and then I will make a comment which is related to both and is also kind of related to everything in interpretation. So first of all, for class 4, which was HDCP slash HDMI. So one of the, I always end up coming up here and saying that another hat that I wear, so another hat that I end up wearing is this, in the county of Santa Barbara, I end up doing a lot of video recording of a lot of different public meetings. And one of the things that we've always considered very important is that public meetings are very well documented. I mean, these meetings here are extremely well documented, which is something that I love so much about the Copyright Office.
Great, thank you.
And it is, and the process of recording a public meeting oftentimes involves trying to record all the different types of things that people end up bringing. And you have very little control over what people end up bringing, and they end up bringing laptops that end up requiring things like HDCP strippers, which is something that, you know, when I end up trying to record with that, I'm not supposed to do that, right? I'm actually up here saying that because I'm pretty certain that there's no one who's actually like going to like try to catch me on it. But the problem is that I don't have good access to that tooling, and I'm actually, it technically is illegal for me to do that. And so I'm in this awkward position whereby in order to adequately record the public meetings, sometimes which I'm a part of, because I know the exemption on government entities is only for security purposes, information security, it is not for general government. Even when the meetings I'm a part of, or the meetings that I'm not a part of, I'm in this awkward problem where in order to actually keep an accurate recording of the meeting, it is effectively impossible to do it under the law, unless I request people have special hardware that they don't have.
I guess I'm still puzzled why you need to stripper, to strip it.
So actually just last night, we had a meeting of the Isla Vista Community Services District. And the problem that we run into is that Mac laptops, which many people have, are just default to having HDCP. And they output the monitor output through using HDCP. Part of this is because, and it depends on the laptop you have, but again, it's essentially it's like somebody is going to come with the laptop that they own and all the presentation materials that they have, and the meeting needs to be recorded. And so
I mean, we're undergoing modernization efforts in the Copyright Office, but in the meantime, we've just asked people to bring a USB drive. I mean, can you do that?
So it depends on the kind of presentation. Sometimes the presentation requires a specialized software that they have. So it's not, for example, a PDF file. It's not a PowerPoint presentation, but it is, in fact, some kind of demonstration that they're performing. It is a format that uses a piece of software that runs on their computer, but doesn't run on the computers that are available. In some cases, it is essentially the audio-visual setup of the room makes it very convenient for them to not have to constantly be switching back and forth between different systems. And whereas so they can bring their single presentation machine and they can be doing everything from their presentation machine rather than having it, for example, during parts of the presentation being run off of like a USB device from a console computer, which is sometimes embedded inside the lectern. It's something that I've run into so many times, and it's actually something where, I mean, there are conferences that I work with, and the conferences have just gone to the point where they just bought an entire box of HDCP strippers, and they sit there and they just make certain that every single room has one set up such that they can record whatever device is brought for that conference purpose. It is, I find it to be such a drastic and common need and weirdly, such an easily doable one, because HDCP strippers are commonly available on the market despite 1201 because they're just produced in other countries and you can buy them online. But the problem is that importing that and utilizing it is still technically illegal. And it is an adverse effect on the ability for not only like these conferences to be able to like organize their event and record it for the people's educational usage. It's an adverse effect on academia in order to be able to record the work that's being done by professors in order to show to the people. And it's an adverse effect on government agencies who are actually have a mandate in order to be publicly accessible and to have the information that's presented available later. That's my commentary on number 4.
Okay, class 8 then?
Okay, class 8, which was video game preservation. So a hat that I used to wear that I don't wear anymore. I spent 4 years working as a game developer on a massively multiplayer online game. So now this class is specified to be it's listed with 3, it's listed with 3 separate types of games, one of which is massively multiplayer online games, one of which is video games with a multiplayer component, and then the third one is, with video games with online multiplayer features, and then the third one is just multiplayer online games. Now, so during the discussion on this a couple days ago, there's a lot of discussion about just how incredibly complicated it is in order to perform these types of modifications. And I actually started to become, as somebody who wants this exemption to happen, I actually started to become a little bit concerned. Because it starts to make it feel like well, even if we have this exemption, are you actually going to succeed in doing this very often? And there were some comments from the opponents stating that, well, in order to actually pull this off, the servers are sufficiently complicated that you would have to re-implement the entire world, and which would involve actually distributing or copying a lot of copyrighted material. And I would like to point out that while that is true for some games, and that is true oftentimes in relation to massively multiplayer online games. This class is covering multiplayer games, games with online multiplayer features. The vast majority of games that are multiplayer actually have a very simple server. The very simple server's goal is to just deal with network address translation issues between all the clients. If I try to have my computer talk directly to your computer, I'm on a cable modem at home, you're on a cable modem, we can't talk directly. But instead, there will be some simple server that was written by the developers that just coordinates access. It provides an online matchmaking service that allows you to find other players. It then provides forwarding service for those packets. These are, as specified by the proponents, very particular to the individual games. It is very seldom you'll find one that works on multiple games. But it is something that if you are able to reverse engineer the tooling of the game and then figure out how these online server components work, you can re-implement it without essentially you've like clean-roomed it. You aren't re-implementing any of the copyrighted material of the game. You aren't redistributing any of the art assets of the game. But you now are able to make these multiplayer online games, video games with online multiplayer features, and some massively multiplayer online games begin work again for the purposes of video game archival.
Is circumvention required?
So circumvention is sometimes required for that, and the reason why is that the games themselves are oftentimes the code for them has been obfuscated, and the obfuscation which is a form of technological protection measure. It is the basis. Obfuscation is the basis of many technological protection measures across all of these classes, including, for example, the fair play encryption used on the iPhone to encrypt applications and to encrypt audio works. That fair play, that encryption mechanism, for example, that is protecting that application, that makes it so that I actually have to bypass that TPM. I have to build I have to like sit around and reverse engineer. Actually, I almost said build tool, but that's actually the same confusion that was brought up by the developer last time. Is that you're building something for that one-off purpose in order to remove that obfuscation from that one thing, and then you usually just throw it away once you're done with it. But I have to sit around and do a lot of work in order to understand what that application was doing, when it was talking to the server, to find out what information the server would have to return back in order to make it work. And that's something that is eminently doable, but it is something that does require developers to actually sit down, break a TPM for that individual application, and then do the work of doing that writing, and that is something that is currently illegal without an exemption under the total one.
So there is an existing exemption, and this was a question that we asked about yesterday, whether you can do that under the existing exemption on PCs or to use a console as a type of listen server. Do you think that there's some of that the preservationists can do already?
So this is just, maybe I'm misunderstanding exactly what the agreement is. So my understanding is that we're intending to expand the exemption to include a different class of games. And so since the class of games would not have been covered before, I'm not certain how.
Preservationists can engage in circumvention to play multiplayer games as long as it's done locally.
Correct. Yes, so that's different. So the idea is, so there are local multiplayer games, and local multiplayer games are typically like you'll have a PlayStation with 4 controllers, and then people can sit down at that game and work with it. The difference here is that this is these are games that have an online component, and so these are games that had previously been built in order to have an online matchmaking service that then allows you to do the across the internet communication, and that's why they've got expanded to further include multiplayer online games. It's possible, of course, that I was just an audience member. It's possible that I misunderstood the class expansion, but.
So I guess the question was, other proponents said that they directed their comments towards local area networks in terms of the games that already have that option available. And so the question is, can you use as an example, the fact that preservationists can jailbreak consoles, and this is one of the rare circumstances that we don't want this to happen. Can you add that functionality by doing so and not have to have an additional exemption for some of these multiplayer games?
So if you're local area network games, so that was another like era of multiplayer gaming whereby you essentially like broadcast on the local area network information about who else is on that network, and then you'd be able to establish the multiplayer setup. It's very different from the online matchmaking services that you end up seeing.
Yeah, I think we understand that, but what we're asking about is can you recreate some of those online games, but not on a connected network that goes outside of the building, but in a different sort of network that you create on your own to play those games, those online games, using online quotes, in a not on a pre-set up local area network, but can you set up some sort of other network using the current exemption?
Because it is the class of work that is being expanded, I would have thought no. Because it's so for this class of work, which is for the massive multiplayer online game, when you end up constructing an alternative server for it, you can run that server anywhere, including locally inside of a room, and you can make it so that no one outside of the room connects to it. You could call that a LAN. But the question maybe that I have back to you is, do you consider that all of these categories that are currently listed here as the class expansion were covered by the previous exemption?
So I think that's a different question.
But I think it's a different question as well, which is why I feel like the argument that is being made here is that in order to, is that we're attempting to expand the class, and so we're attempting to expand what kinds of works we're allowed to do the circumvention on to include games that were not designed for LAN multiplayer, but were designed for online multiplayer and designed for even massive multiplayer.
Yeah, and my question is, can you do any of that already under the current exemption?
No, because the exemption is tied to a class, which is not massive multiplayer, but is instead the more limited multiplayer.
So right now you can circumvent and you can jailbreak the console if you're one of these institutions, and then you can set up a LAN that enables the matchmaking. And I'm not going to pretend to know as much about some of the different types of games as some of the panelists and Rob yourself, but it needs to be a complete game. A complete game means a video game that can be played by users without accessing or reproducing copyrightable content stored or previously stored in an external computer server. And so we're being asked to expand the definition of complete games. But I think when you started discussing that there's some games where you don't need to reproduce copyrightable material on the external server, you just need to facilitate the matchmaking functions. I think what Mr. Riley is asking is whether you could do that on a LAN that you create as part of this preservation activity.
Yes.
So 2 things. The description you just read, I believe, is actually slightly different in the sense that so the case of a matchmaking service, the matchmaking server code is copyrighted. You are reliant upon the copyrighted work that is running on that server. The question is, if you were to write a new one, is it derivative work? And I believe that the answer has usually been no, unless you had if you had never been able to see the original.
Well, it's
And
like
so,
a video game that can be played, and I guess if you're doing your own matchmaking on this land, you can still play the game. Maybe that becomes like, I don't know how to define whether you can still play the game if you've matchmaked it in a different way you've set up on this land. But I think that's what he's getting at, whether some of these games you're talking about can fall under the current definition of complete game.
and the definition of complete game you described.
Yeah, I can read again. It's video games that can be played by users, so it's focused, I think, on the playability, without accessing or reproducing copyrightable content stored or previously stored on an external computer server.
And the class expansion, and the expansion that we're looking to do is for games where it is required to reproduce copyright. Okay. Yeah, I probably just misunderstood a lot of the context of the class expansions as an audience member. So the cases where I'm describing do require essentially like reproducing something, but not copying something. Like it's not not legal reproduction. It is instead a refacsimile. Like
Kind of like reverse engineering.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. So.
Okay,
All right.
can I ask what MMO you were?
You wouldn't have heard of it. It's called Eschaton Chain of Command. It was something that was very similar to EVE Online that came out later, but we did not finish it. It turns out that no one at our company knew how to make anything that was fun. We only knew how to make things that were like fast. So, all right. So the final comment that I wanted to make is that when you look at what the goal of this process is, the goal of this process, as defined in the law, was to find people who had non-infringing uses that were adversely affected, and then to figure out how to allow them to continue doing that. The actual the statements in the law, multiple times state that the goal of the rulemaking process is to find and list the non-infringing uses that have been adversely impacted by the scope of this law. It then lists criteria by which the Copyright Office is supposed to use to determine what an adverse impact is. But it is for determining what an adverse impact is. It's not seen to be like about whether or not the rule should happen, but about determining the criteria by which we can measure adverse impact. There is a criteria which is the marketability and value of the copyrighted work, which is listed at the very end of that list. And I find that when I sit here and listen to these arguments, I sit here and argue against people, in person even with them, right? That the argument oftentimes ends up hinging on some idea that by providing an exemption for this class, that will just decimate the market that is for that area. And there are some places where the Copyright Office explicitly looked into it and explicitly found things that they were very concerned by. An example of that might be video game consoles, which tend to be relatively specialized piece of hardware where a video game is designed specifically for that piece of hardware. But we see that same argument somehow being utilized for things like online streaming media, for things like Spotify and things like Pandora, for things like Netflix and things like Amazon Prime. And yet these are situations where the media is in a very general format that is playable anywhere. These are cases where the software that is available to play it is available on every platform, both weak platforms and strong platforms. We see this argument being applied to devices such as smart speakers, all the way through to devices such as iPhones. And in some of these cases, the argument is just, I will just say almost absurd on the face of it, because on that very device, you don't actually need to have done the circumvention. So as an example of this, there was an argument that was made in the written comments from the App Association about, it might have been, I'm sorry, it was either the App Association or it was the ESA. That was about a game from one of their members, which had been, which they found on the Google Play Store. They found another copy of that game that had the same art and the same name. But in order to reproduce a game that has the same art, that has the same name, you do not need to have a jailbroken device. You do not need to have circumvented anything. You simply need to have screenshotted the art assets and then published a game that looks the same, that has the same name. Very similarly, if you would like to publish, if you would like to have on a smart speaker, you would want to have audio being able to play through it that's pirated. Well, you can copy that audio off of any device and then play it through your smart speaker. If you would like to be able to watch a pirated movie, well, anyone in the world had managed to obtain a DMCA script just once, then you can stream that, you can download a copy of that movie and play it on any of these devices without the user doing any circumvention. Now the question is whether the person who was doing the copying specifically, but we know that person was doing something illegal. That person, and so the problem that I run into is that the act of allowing, for example, a user to circumvent their device in order to disable the touchpad that is glitchy, to allow a user to circumvent a device in order to do security research that is not solely for the purpose of good faith research, to allow a user to circumvent a device in order to determine if there is in order to get the time code information from a DVD, or to be able to do screen readers, or any of these use cases. This stopping those people from doing that doesn't actually affect the market of pirated work. And I feel like the Copyright Office for video game consoles, I'll even admit, as somebody who I really hate admitting it, but I'll even admit you make some arguments that move me at times. But I just have never felt the argument for Spotify, Pandora, Netflix, Amazon Prime, any of these movie or music services, because the content is so generally available. I have not felt that argument for applications that can be used on general purpose computers with operating systems like Android that are available on all sorts of different hardware platforms.
I mean, I'm sorry, are you saying because there's a lot of pirated music that we should just allow circumvention of Spotify? Is that what it's representing?
So what I'm trying to say is that we're throwing out the baby with the bathwater by saying that technically I can circumvent Spotify, even though what we're actually trying to get is circumventions for purposes of protecting people, circumventions for allowing disabled people to be able to utilize works, circumventions that allow people to do things that were creatively not possible before. That but people will say, but technically that car is capable of running Spotify, so you shouldn't be able to jailbreak anything on that car. And it's like, okay, but I really didn't buy a car in order to steal music from Spotify. That just doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, I was able to do that on my computer. The reason none of us are sitting around trying to, and the pirates aren't doing this on cars. There's no pirate who is sitting around in their garage in a car trying to steal music from Spotify. They're doing it on all of these other devices. And so the idea to me that these circumventions that circumventions are being argued as they should be disallowed because of theoretical potential use cases that are copyright ridden, that are already able to be done everywhere else, it's just very strange to me. And I feel like that should be more strongly realized when looking at that criteria, that there is an adverse impact. That adverse impact has been shown. The adverse impact sometimes merely feels devastating, and the question is that then, does that circumvention in that case, does the ability for does the copyright owner coming and claiming that theoretically the car can use Spotify, I feel like they should really be on the hook to show that people actually are going to sit around in their garage with their car using these techniques in order to be able to circumvent that music before the Copyright Office does not grant that exemption. So that's the kind of cross-cutting concern comment.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.